Thank y'all for joining me this morning, right? We are going to have a sort of a continuation of Mike's conversation this morning. So for those of you that were in Mike's morning session at 9 a.m., we're going to talk about some of these special stipulations that he was referencing. And he says, I have a nice list of them. Well, I don't have a nice list of them for you. They are all in Docs Plus for you to use. They're already pre-printed in there, right? So what we'll do is we will start a new contract. Of course, when you start a new contract, you can just go to packages up at the top, right? And we can come to Century 21. We have our affiliated business, brokerage agreements, all that stuff, right? Purchase and sale, I'm going to make it easy. We're just going to have a cash purchase and sale agreement. All right, so check all the boxes. Next, add it. Gotta love the internet, right? Tick-tock, tick-tock. Din, 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 din. All right, purchase and sale agreement. So we'll go in here, and when you do the packages, you'll notice that one of those that Mike discusses is already put in the packages for you. All parties agree that if any contingencies, including due diligence, expire on a weekend or holiday, they automatically extend to the next day, right? So that you're not working on the weekends, right? Make your life easier. That's one thing he says, right? Make your life easier. Make everything work better. This one says at 11:59 p.m. it's automatically in there. I personally would change it to 5 or 6 p.m. I don't want to be running around trying to terminate or get an amendment signed at 11 o'clock at night. I'm usually in bed sleeping at that time, right? So when we come down here, right, we can create new. No, we will add clauses, right? There are multiple different clauses in here that you can add, and you just need to search some sort of keyword that you're looking for. Like Mike talks about a seller due diligence, right? If you do, that's all we did. Oh, look, reverse seller due diligence. We will preview that. Seller reserves the right to unilaterally terminate this contract for any reason within the due diligence period. That's kind of a iffy one, right? Like, how does that work? Just like it's written. The seller is also reserving the right to terminate the contract. One thing that you would use for that, for instance, would be you want to get the lender involved. You want to make sure that the lender's asking your questions, answering your questions as an agent, right? This would be kind of the stipulation that you'd use for that. Other stips that are in there, there's a whole bunch of them. Go ahead, Stephanie, what's your question?
Do we have access to these if we are not a member of NAR?
Oh, nope.
Right.
No, but we will get them.
Okay.
I will get them. Please send me an email and I'll get it updated. That only impacts you in this room. So, yes, I will get those updated into the Connect. The question was, are these stipulations available in Connect Real Estate? No, they are not, but we will get them, all of the company ones. Make sense? All right, other questions? And what kind of special steps who was in Mike's session this morning? Jasmine, what's another one that he talked about?
He talked about removing the 8-day unilateral. Is there a step for that, or do you guys just like cross it out of the actual?
We'll just go back there and we'll do 8. Let's do unilateral. Right? Insurance company, remove 8-day unilateral extension. Preview. Section 8A is hereby stricken from the contract and all closing date extensions must be mutually agreed upon. Right? So anything that you want to do, right? So they're all in here. Everything that Mike talked about, just search a keyword. If you're like, I want to make my offer stronger. Kind of goes the same way. Even if so let's say you're representing a seller and you get an FHA offer on the table, right? Kind of one of the big things is there is no way to get the FHA appraisal. Like, if it doesn't appraise, the buyer gets their earnest money, they can't be penalized, right? The amendatory clause, we all know that. Oh, look at this one. FHA. FHA amendatory to speed up the appraisal. Right? So this is a nice long stipulation. You'll see, I mean, it's got a scroll bar and everything. The gist of this one is right, the buyer can't be penalized if the property doesn't appraise, but there is nothing that requires them to have it done in a certain time, right? This stipulation says the buyer will get the FHA appraisal done within X days of binding agreement date. And if they don't have the appraisal done by that date, the seller can terminate if the buyer doesn't remedy within so long and retain earnest money. So it speeds up. Alternatively, you're submitting FHA offers, you're working with an FHA buyer, and it's hard to get the seller to agree, right? Sellers are going, I don't want to deal with the FHA buyers, all that stuff. Put this on your buyer contract, and it'll make your offer stronger to the seller, right? To say, we're not going to delay getting the FHA appraisal. We want to know if it appraises as well. Make sense? All right, so again, in the special Stips, when you're going to add them, just click in here and search any little thing. What's another one Mike talked about? I can pull up. Anybody got any ideas?
He talked about a page, the 2 pages that you have.
2 pages? Yeah, they're all, I don't remember them all. But anything that you can think of. And if you think of something like, ooh, I think this would make my offer stronger, call the broker hotline. We will help you write the stip. If it's a good stip, if we think it's a great one, we will add it to the library so that all of you have it. Make sense? You have just, what's another one that I can think of? Go ahead, Jasmine.
I ask you, what would be your top 5 like on the listing side that you would recommend?
The top 5 on the listing side?
Yeah, like if you you would counter to the buyer's agent for your seller. In your opinion.
That is so subjective, I can't even answer the question. Depends on the seller and their motivation. You know, is the seller buying another house? You know, and it kind of goes, what all's in the original contract? So it is a lot of touch and feel. So I don't have an answer for your question of which ones would I recommend. Number 1, remove the 8-day unilateral extension. Nobody likes getting that served upon them, right? Nobody. That is the worst, especially if they're buying a home, right? That one. And then closing date, never close on a Monday, a Friday, or the last 2 days of the month. If you can follow those, your closing nightmares will go away. The attorneys are so busy at the end of the month, and on Fridays, everybody wants to close on Friday, right? You close at 3 o'clock on Friday. The property doesn't fund. Yeah, the buyer can't take possession until it funds, right? Which could be the following Monday. So you just wasted the whole weekend. If you close on a Thursday, and it takes the next day to fund, you're good to go. Buyer's in the house by the weekend. So stop closing Fridays, Mondays, and the last 2 days of the month. I wouldn't do that. Tracy's familiar with that one, I think, right? So those, and then make your deadlines earlier in the day. I personally, I don't want to work till midnight, ever. So,
Is there
Go
a
ahead.
stipulation where, you know how you get the earnest money always goes to the seller and the buyer puts that, right? But if it's the buyer terminating for no reason at all,
no legal
sorry,
reason?
if it's the seller terminating for no reason at all, just because they don't want to, or nothing like legally, let's say.
Okay. Seller's terminating, but they don't have a legal right to terminate.
Yeah. Is there a stipulation you can use so the buyer gets the same amount of earnest money? Like not gets his earnest money that he already put, no, get paid.
Gets his earnest money plus additional money.
Yeah, plus the same amount of like.
I don't have one in there, so
Yeah,
if the
but
seller fails to close, so pre-written in the contract is if the seller fails to close at no fault of the buyer has a few options. Number 1, they can sue for specific performance, right? They can force the seller to sell them the house. That's not practical though, right? So no, that's pretty much not it. Then it says if the seller defaults, the buyer is entitled to their earnest money back as well as any expenses that they've had. So if they have paid for an appraisal, paid for an inspection, paid for different items, they are entitled to that money back. In most instances, they're going to have to sue the seller, magistrate court, do all that. It's typically small claims court stuff for $1,000. It takes time, but they will win. The contract is written, the GAR contracts are tested in the courts, so.
But my question is, can we put something in there that we don't have to go through court, we don't have to go through all this? Just like, if you terminate it with no right to terminate, you're giving me the same amount of money I put as an earnest money.
Send me an email on that and I will check with our attorney to make sure. I think that's getting close to writing a contract where you start getting in a gray area where you're not just filling in the blanks of a GAR contract. You're starting to Right, so there's a lot of extra language. Just like in this FHA amendatory clause one, I mean, there is a lot of legal jargon throughout this, notwithstanding any provision to the contrary contained herein, and the amendatory clause in the FHA shall control over inconsistent information. So the FHA amendatory clause, this keeps it in play and says we acknowledge that if the property doesn't appraise, you get it. We just want it done by a certain amount of time. So when we get into writing these stipulations, what you're asking for, I think, is going to be a stipulation about this much of 2 pages of stipulation. So it's getting into more into writing contracts. But I can check into it. Send me an email on it. Any other questions?
And then Mike talked about getting paid to extend.
Getting
That-
paid
To extend. Like if
to
you
extend.
give money to
That's
your
called a per diem.
seller. Yeah, to your seller.
Per diem. For extending closing date. Seller to be paid a per diem to extend the closing. Either one. Read through them. In the event the sale does not close on or before the scheduled close date due to no fault of the seller may at its option agree to a mutual extension for $100 a day. You can make that whatever you want it to be per day, right? And that's the seller's holding expenses. I mean, if you look at days of interest on your closing statement, typically it's anywhere from 70 to 150 bucks, right? So that's just the days of interest for their carrying costs for extending the closing. So, yes, ma'am.
Is there a special stipulation for like the buyer's brokerage if you want to hold a retainer fee?
The retainer fee,
And how would the process work?
I don't believe there is. There is a retainer fee field on the buyer's brokerage agreement. I'm expecting buyer's brokerage agreements to change soon, so I don't want to jump too much into it. But we can search and see if there is anything retainer.
How do you think,
Nothing pulled up, huh?
how do you think they're going to change?
I don't know. I don't even want to speculate.
Okay.
They're going to change, just as the laws and everything else. But we're still up in the air. I don't know how it's going to go. If I knew that, I'd be a billionaire, I promise you.
And then so like I know we're not supposed to take money directly, so how would it go through you guys if we were to collect a retainer?
So collecting a retainer fee,
Yeah.
they'd write a check to Century 21 Connect Realty. It is subject to your normal split.
Okay.
Royalty split, the whole 9 yards. It's subject to it. It's commission income. You're just getting paid up front instead of on the back end, right? Make sense? Questions? No? All right, thanks for joining me.